Thank you, Madam President, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you all for all your beautiful speeches so far, and thanks for everyone here for the opportunity to speak today. I believe it's such a fitting time to debate a motion such as this, especially in today's geopolitical climate. With all the events in Eastern Europe and the Middle East, the great moral question of the red button feels eerily apt. Today, I stand before you in proposition of this motion, fervently asserting that in select circumstances, the use of nuclear weapons, or at least the threat of their use, can be necessitated. I'd like to begin by drawing the House's attention to the exact motion. I'm not attempting to persuade you that the use of nuclear weapons is moral, it's right, or justified. I'm simply explaining that as a nation, we need to be prepared to press the red button should the horrific circumstances which necessitate such an action ever arise. More so than that, a willingness to launch a nuclear strike, despite how paradoxical it may seem, has played a pivotal role in preserving peace, safeguarding national security, and upholding global stability. Imagine when the world first emerged from the ashes of World War II, with the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki fresh in the collective memory. While these events served as chilling reminders of the potential havoc that nuclear weapons can wreak, they also triggered a momentous realization. The dawn of the nuclear age brought with it the notion of, as you've heard before, mutually assured destruction. This grim concept, however it may seem, effectively harnessed the power of nuclear weapons to prevent their use. Think of the Cold War, an era when nuclear arsenals ballooned and espionage was at its peak. But despite all that tension, the world stayed cold. Why? Because the world's superpowers had a big red button sitting atop their desks, and while nobody wanted to press it, or were more than willing to do so. I'll take it. I'd agree that there can be multiple reasons for any deterrence of why war may be avoided, but I think quite a big one, especially as you'll hear about later on in my speech, is the fact that everyone can destroy everyone at any time. This wasn't just the peace of the Cold War. It was the fear of a hot one. It was a threat of mutual annihilations that kept tensions from heating up. Such tensions couldn't have been more taut than in one of the most heart-pounding chapters in history, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. When the US discovered Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba, all of a sudden it felt like the world was walking on a tightrope over a pit of fire. The question on everyone's mind, would someone press the red button? Kennedy and Khrushchev had their fingers on the button, but they didn't press. They showed restraint, because both understood that they were holding the keys to mutually assured destruction. Not quite yet. The thought of that outcome alone was enough to make them opt for peace talks over nuclear Armageddon. Key to my argument, though, and the proposition's argument, is that it was Kennedy and Khrushchev's willingness to press the red button that made the concept of a nuclear deterrence a reality. Knowing full well the other side would happily launch a nuclear strike in retaliation, both sides exercised restraint, saving us from a scenario where we could be debating this motion from the depths of a post-apocalyptic bunker. Not quite yet, sorry. You do scare me. Well, it brought us to the brink. It also showed that responsible leadership could navigate the perilous waters of nuclear brinkmanship. One often underappreciated aspect of the debate is how our readiness to use nuclear weapons can deter the proliferation of these deadly arms. By demonstrating our commitment to employ them whenever and wherever absolutely necessary, we send a resounding message to other nations that, although often seen by nations as a sign of strength, investing in a nuclear program is not always a right path.
Point of information.
I'll take it.
So, did the United States' readiness and willingness to use nuclear weapons, as we clearly saw with Japan, stop, proliferation in 8 more countries after that?
Oh, not at all, but keep in mind at that point, What's your nuclear power then? You've got America. They had 2 bombs. How many did they have after Japan? 0. Now they've got a lot. As in, they have to build them. Anyways. One often underappreciated, a credible, feasible deterrent discourages other states from venturing down the perilous road of nuclear proliferation, bolstering global security and peace. Not yet. Fast forward to slightly more recent times and consider North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons in the early 2000s. Bear with me. The world watched with growing concern as North Korea accelerated its nuclear program, posing a significant threat to regional stability. But it's worth noting that the global response wasn't to launch an attack. Instead, they chose a diplomatic path. Diplomacy and sanctions became the weapons of choice. The world flexed its economic muscles and applied diplomatic pressures. The message was clear. Nuclear ambitions had consequences. So what made North Korea pause and think? It was the knowledge that its actions would invite a catastrophic response from nations with powerful nuclear arsenals. The credible threat was, quite literally, earth-shattering. We'd press the button. So here we see an example of where a credible deterrent can prevent self-proliferation and promote peaceful solutions. Even though North Korea is now officially a self-proclaimed nuclear power, at least these diplomatic talks helped delay armament by nearly 20 years. I'm sorry, not now, sorry. There's a lot of these. Nuclear weapons aren't just a tool of destruction. They're also a tool of diplomacy. History has taught us that in the face of great evil, moral responsibility can extend to the use of force. The world saw the horrors of 2 world wars that resulted in millions of lives lost and immense suffering. Had the major powers possessed nuclear weapons earlier, the destructive capacity may have acted as a powerful deterrent, potentially preventing or mitigating these conflicts. Sorry, not. It's not about being overzealous, eagerly awaiting an opportunity to press the red button. It's about acknowledging that in the direst of circumstances, we have a duty to protect the greatest number of people. When the stakes are as high as the survival of our nation, we need to consider every option to minimize suffering. And that's where the pressing of the red button comes in, an option of last resort. The use of nuclear weapons should not necessarily be seen as a purely aggressive act, but rather as a tool to maintain peace, protect our nations, and serve as a potent deterrent against those who would threaten the world's security. We hope for a world without the need for such weapons. We must recognize their historical role in perhaps preventing large-scale conflicts. Lastly, I urge you not to be swayed by the arguments presented by the opposition today. Disregard their claims that an unwillingness to press the red button would usher in a future of peace. Do not blindly believe that pacifism is always the answer. Instead, look back to some global foreign policy of, say, the 1920s and 1930s, marked by widespread pacifism, and see where that in part led us, to the horrors of World War II. The world we inhabit today is one where nuclear weapons exist. And without a steadfast willingness to press the red button, if only for retaliation, the entire concept of mutually assured destruction, which has helped preserve peace for decades, would be rendered ineffective. As we consider the pros and cons of this motion, let's remember that the decision to press the red button should always be a last resort. Approached with caution and wisdom, the responsibility to make this decision is heavy and should be exercised with the utmost care and commitment to global peace. Let us remain mindful of history's lessons. Nuclear weapons serve as a grim but necessary reminder that in certain circumstances, the use of force can prevent even greater horrors. We must hope for a world where they are never used, but remain prepared to face the unimaginable if it becomes unavoidable. Please vote in favor of the proposition. Thank you.